So welcome, Bill Wadman, joining us today from Brooklyn.
Hello.
Hi, thank you very much for being with us.
It's good to be here.
So we're going to look through some of your work. We've been
Okay.
following your work for quite a long time at school, and we're particularly studying your work in context of movement at the moment. But I just want to start by asking you what inspired you particularly about dancers or dance?
You know, it's funny. I came to photography rather late in my life. Um, I didn't really pick up a camera until well after college. I didn't start doing it professionally until my 30s. Um, I was an art director in advertising. I went to music school before that. So dance was never sort of on my radar. And during my first 365 portrait series back in 2007, I met the woman that is actually in the picture that's on the screen right now. Her name is Iran Buggy, and she's one of my top best friends now. And she volunteered for my project, and I photographed her, and we've stayed friends ever since. And at the time, she was a junior dancer in this dance company called the Paul Taylor Dance Company here in New York, this big modern dance company. And now, as of now, she is the senior dancer in the Paul Taylor Dance Company, which is just really funny how you go from the bottom to the top over the course of 10, 15 years.
Mm.
But after meeting her and meeting all of her friends and sort of expanding this worldview I had of dance, dancers are fantastic for photography because they know how to move their bodies. They generally have beautiful bodies to look at to begin with, so you get this, you sort of get this leg up. It's like playing golf with a handicap. It's like you automatically are going to get better pictures just because you have people who are almost guaranteed to look good on camera, and so either through their form or the look of them, even if they're perfectly still. So that's where it really started for me. And then you start trying to bring in some element of the dancers themselves and their personality. And I personally, I'll look at some of these motion pictures and I can tell who the dancer is, even though they're just blurred smears. Not only because I remember it, but because certain ones have a certain explosiveness, certain ones have a very smooth nature to the way they moved, and all of that is sort of inherent in the way that they learned how to manipulate their bodies, and so they're just great muses. Is basically the easy answer to the question.
Okay.
Um,
I mean, I'm looking, there's such a wide range
yeah,
uh, of things you photograph. It's not obviously just dancers, but I do
nope.
wonder about this kind of performative or rather performer-led obsession in your work. I wonder if you believe yourself to be a performer through photographs.
Um, I when I was in school, when I was in music school and stuff, and I used to play a lot more. Um, I was more of a performer the way that these dancers and musicians and those kinds of people are. Um, with photography, the nice thing about it is that you sort of can freeze time and perfect your performance, or at least get it to the best it's going to be, um, by taking the photograph and then spending time in post-production and stuff, retouching and modeling and moving and curving and doing all the things that we do. So you get to basically put out the final product when you think it's ready, not when somebody says, okay, it's 8 p.m. You've got to start your thing 5, 6, 7, 8, um, which I find very gratifying because I personally never liked the time crunch of performing in real time, as it were. But that said, there's also something about that immediacy that you get with people who are musicians or people who are dancers or people. And I've been doing more short films lately, so people are acting and that kind of stuff. I mean, when minutes and seconds are clicking by and something beautiful has to happen, it's and you got to do what you can do to make that happen or capture it or what have you. um Sometimes I miss that because photography is very, I mean, if you go to Cartier-Bresson and you look at you're trying to find the moment and all this kind of stuff, I generally don't work that way. I don't actually although I don't take that many pictures. There are people who will photograph and they'll take 600 pictures of somebody in a sitting. I'll take maybe 100. You know, I'm not the kind of person to take, I'm not bang, 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 bang. I don't do that kind of thing. So in some ways, while they're performing, I am trying to find the moment that I think I want and hit the button. You know, that's part of my job. So yeah, I think it's a performance, but my performance is sort of performance in slow motion.
Okay. And when you're looking
Yeah.
really in any of your subjects, do you think you're always questioning for beauty somehow in what you shoot?
Yeah, because I like beautiful things.
Yeah.
I, you know, it's, you know, a lot of people look at their pictures and they're trying to get people to, I mean, obviously there's people who just take pictures of beautiful people all the time, and that's easy. Not that hard when you're taking pictures of beautiful people all the time. I try to create things though that are the kind of pictures that I would want to see other people take. And it's funny, sometimes I will see somebody else's work and I'll think to myself, yeah, I wish I had taken that picture. I wish I was the person who took that picture. That's exactly the kind of picture I want to take. And that, you know, there were some pictures of some of the dancers in the Mark Morris company that Annie Leibovitz took years and years and years ago. And they had this sort of low key kind of dark feeling to them with just a little bit of like a little hint of color. And so when I was taking like pictures like the one that's up here now of my friend Sasha, she, you know, that is actually window light with a little beauty dish over to the side with it. So it's just like a little bit of light coming from the side, but most of it is coming from a window behind me. So
on your website, when
Yeah.
I was looking at this particular photograph, you did write that as a blurb on this photograph, on this series. But often you're not writing anything with your photographs. Is that because in this particular photograph or series of photographs of Sasha, you felt like there needed to be some kind of support to what you'd shot? Or do you believe that the photograph speaks for itself?
I think a photograph speaks for itself. I've been trying lately. There are some photographers who I have massive respect for, like Art Schreiber and all these kinds of people who do a lot of behind the scenes and talk about how they took the picture they are taking. So I sort of been trying to make a conscious, you know, decision to start doing that myself more. Because if somebody looks at this picture and they think, oh my God, how did Bill take that picture? And I give them a little hint at the way they lit it or the way I lit it, then maybe they go, oh, I get it. You know, and I want to follow him, or I like him because he's not, I don't want people to think that the way that I take pictures is some sort of, you know, formula for Coca-Cola, you know, that can't be sent around, you know. This knowledge is all out there. A few years ago, I was up at the Eddie Adams workshop, which is this big photojournalism annual workshop thing with all these students. And I go there as sort of a person who helps keep the thing on its rails. There's a team of people who actually kind of run the thing. And this is my first year there. And Dan Winters was there. And Dan Winters is one of my all-time heroes. And there was a woman presenting her work, and I forget exactly what the topic was, but it was this person who was presenting their work. Their work was beautiful, but it was kind of depressing me. It was just one of these, you know, kinds of things. And I looked out the window, and up on the hill, Dan Winters was setting up lights. And apparently one of the teams of students was going to have Dan Winters take their official portrait. And as a, you know, student, as it were, of Dan Winters, I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing here? I got to go up there and talk to that guy. So I run up the hill and I say, hey, Dan, you know, do you need a hand? He's like, yeah. So I helped Dan Winters assist on the shoot. And I think it's one of the only shoots I've ever assisted on, because I didn't come through that world, you know. Anyway, Dan Winters is there, this like super fancy guy who shoots everything for everybody. And he's using somebody's 5D, which is not a camera he would normally use. And he's having trouble getting it to do the right settings. And then he's taking test pictures and he's doing exposure math in his head. He's just saying, oh, I got to bring the fill light down a half a stop and bring that up. And let's move that up 4 feet. And if we do that, we got to give that 2/3 of a stop. He's like doing exposure math the way that I would do in my head while taking a picture outdoors, trying to balance strobes and environmental light, available light. And after the whole thing was done, he and I were walking down the hill. And I said, Dan, I just got to ask you, you have a thing in your pictures where, you know, the fill light is just perfect. It just kind of fills in the shadows. It's in some ways in the same way that this picture of Sasha, very little of it's actually black, right? There's some detail in the shadows. He does this better with strobes using a ring light or whatever. And I said, how do you get that? How do you get that perfect ratio? And he says, I just keep messing with it till it looks good. And I just thought, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, darn it. Dan Winters does the same thing everyone else does. He's just better at it.
Yeah.
And there's something sort of equalizing about that, because it just means that I just have to practice more and maybe I can get as good as Dan Winters or different than Dan Winters or better than Dan Winters or whatever. That it's not about, I mean, there's a certain amount of knowledge, but a lot of it is just experience, right? So to answer your question, I've started to share more of the technical details of the photographs, if only to allow people who are trying to figure out how I did them to replicate them, you know.
But you don't
I'd like to.
That there's any kind of, you know, if there's a particular mystique in an image that
that people are going to call me on it.
Well, kind of like an oversubscription to technicality.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about photography, at least the way I do it, is I see it as almost a perfect split between an art and a science. I mean, there is the composition, there is the decision making, there is, you know, what you're trying to accomplish and trying to accomplish it. But in that trying to accomplish it is the how do I accomplish it? And I think that like all of that sort of technical knowledge, it's not that the technical knowledge is important in the sense that it's what makes the images, but it is important in the way that it allows you to take the images. It's like sort of having a good vocabulary so that you can speak well and, you know, get your point across. So I am certainly not an overly technical photographer. I know those people who are just constantly just talking about light meter readings. I'm definitely not that person.
Yeah.
But I want to know how I took some pictures so that if somebody says, I want you to take pictures of like that of me, I know how I did it. And so I can do it again, you know. That's the way I took it.
You and I obviously have communicated beforehand, and we picked up on this other inspiration you've cited in a previous interview, which is Stéphane Lavaux.
Yeah.
Thinking about, you know, if you were able to have access to his technical repertoire, if he's gonna, you know, call you up and say,
"Oh, I've talked to him before.
Hey, Bill, this is exactly how I shoot these photographs." Would you, go about doing that?
Shooting like him? I would probably go out, and there are times where I actually have done exactly that because he told me how he takes those pictures. Yeah. Although I think that his style is as much to do with the post-production as it is with how he takes the pictures. And French people are cool looking. I don't know what it is. There's something, because he shoots all these French people, and like some of them are not particularly attractive people, but they're so interesting looking the way that they're, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the spaces that they're in or the clothes they choose to wear or the way that they style themselves. It's all very French to me, the way whenever I see his pictures. So part of me feels like I'm missing out because I don't have Frenchmen in front of my camera.
Do you think this photograph and your corner series all have a kind of Frenchness to them? I think they kind
Do they?
Yes, because of the muted color,
Oh, okay. I'll take that. I mean, I've been trying to do less contrasty kind of popping stuff. But to answer your question really quickly, I will often try to figure out how other people took photos of theirs. I will often copy them almost verbatim to try to say, like, I want to recreate this photograph to see if I can do it. Mostly just so I can then say, I figured out how they did that. So now I can stick that in my toolbox for someday that I need it. Not that I'm going to then do an entire series that looks like Stéphane Louveau portraits, but I want to figure out how Stéphane Louveau does it so that maybe that gives me a tool that'll allow me to expand my worldview.
I mean, when you're making these photographs, the corner series,
yep.
were you conscious of Louveau at the time when you were making these photographs?
Yeah, to some extent. Although interestingly enough, okay, there is two different lighting stuff going on in these two pictures. The one on the left of Kelsey and the one on the bottom of McGinley, Heather McGinley. Do you notice that the shadows are much more filled in? Where the picture of Laura up top, the shadows go black. Yeah. There's a beauty dish is like the main light in all of these pictures. And then the one of Laura where it goes black in the shadows, that was an early shot. And it's before I added another strobe for fill, which I just bounced off the wall behind me and ended up filling in the shadows a little bit. It's funny because
shadow, is that because of on your part a search for painterliness?
Oh yeah, I mean certainly. I mean in both directions, both in the really hard contrast and in the ones with fill in the shadows. Because I mean, if you were going to ask me who my biggest inspiration is, most of the time I'm not going to answer any photographer. I'm going to answer Caravaggio. I'm going to answer John Singer Sargent. I'm going to answer, it's those people, Velasquez, it's like those people that I would look at and say, that's what I want to create, often to my detriment, I think, because I think that the world, this is going to sound like a real old man thing, and I don't mean it as such, but I think that the world has in many ways moved on from the idea of sort of the formal portrait that is well composed and everything sort of in its right place. I like taking that picture.
Why do you think the world's moved on from that?
Well, because I'm old now, and people want things that are much more reportage and much more on camera flash, and much more look like they were shot on a phone, which, I've taken pictures on phones. I'm not dissing that, but there is a certain level of informality that I think is more well regarded, at least by the kind of people who hire people like me. It all goes in waves, right? Where, things go in and out. For a long time, what's his name? Why am I completely blanking on his name? I will come up with it. Just on camera flash was like, oh, this super flat thing. I remember a few years I entered the Taylor Wessing Prize. And I remember the picture that won one of the years was so terribly lit. It just was not a good, in my estimation, it was just not a good photograph. Sometimes the ones that win, I think, oh man, that's beautiful. I wish I could take that. And then there are other times I look at them and I think the subject's not very good. The lighting is not very good. I don't even think that it communicates all that much. And yet somebody thought that this is, where portraiture is in whatever, say 2015 or 2017. And it makes me feel like, well, you know what, your way of doing things is a little on the outs. Keep doing it, because you can't chase looks, right? You can't chase where the zeitgeist of the art or the world is. That's just a fool's errand. Yeah. So you just have to sort of make the work you want to see, and hope that other people appreciate it for what it is. I think that's kind of where I've come down to in my old age. You're laughing at me for saying I'm old age.
I'm just looking at photographs in which I see no evidence of any kind of self-consciousness of trend, for one.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Also looking at photographs that are beautiful, and I think a sense that they might not belong now because they don't follow a trend is something that, for example, in my teaching, I'm speaking a lot about moving away from trend. As you say, if you're chasing something, you're always behind it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what I'm saying. And the fact that if you don't see trends in my work, then I'm doing my job in a sense. But that doesn't mean that that's not somewhere inside the back of my head. Because ultimately, some of my work I do to make money. So, you know, I mean, there's a certain level of what do people want right now? Well, they may want X and I shoot Y. And that's just a reality of the market.
Do you find that people have an insatiable desire for other people?
I think that yes, they do. Although I think with today's social media, they get that desire fulfilled very well.
And is that why then you spend time in some way distorting the form? So
With these, yeah, this is so these Mylar pictures are some of my dancer friends, a few of the same ones actually who are in the motion series, and a few newer ones who are I put up a sheet of Mylar, you know, like sort of plastic with aluminum shot onto it, so it ends up being like a flexible mirror. And I am shooting that, and they are to my left, reflected in the mirror. Does that make sense? I'm not shooting them; I'm shooting their reflection. And usually when they jumped up, because there's enough sort of give in my floor of my space, it would shake the mirror enough so that you would get these crazy distorted images. I just thought that it was really interesting what that chance did to their forms, which is kind of interesting because even in the motion images, there's also a whole element of chance in them. You could have the same person do the same motion in the same amount of time 5 times, and some of them look like something and some of them don't. Just because it's not like you have somebody jumping up in the air and you're trying to capture that one exact moment. All of these have this level of chaos that gets thrown in as like a little spice when the picture gets taken, which can lead to madness or it can lead to something really cool. Like, look at a really strangely small foot there next to her butt. How small their foot got. I mean, I couldn't have planned that. That's just the way it ended up, you know?
that leads me to the question really about the sitter's identity in your work. So you're shooting sometimes the same people quite frequently or across different series. And you said earlier about the sense of perhaps their personality starting to come through in the Dancers in Motion series, for example.
Sure.
And yet, when we're looking at this together now, it strikes me that we are looking purely at something physical.
Yeah, I think in this
emotional content in this?
in this series, I think it's largely they are just sort of meat for form, as it were. You know what I'm saying? That they are an object as much as anything, and that's not disregarding my beautiful friends and their dancing ability. Um, it's interesting though that even the work that you're choosing to pull up. I mean, the motion series, the distortion stuff, those are sort of in many ways oddball, or sort of the not the odd men out, but sort of the minority position of a lot of my work, in the sense that they are almost still lifes with people more than they are portraits.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that I don't enjoy them, not to say that I'm not happy with them and all the rest of it. It's just that most of the time, what I enjoy about photography is spending an hour or 2 hours with somebody while taking their picture and talking to them, you know, basically doing what you and I are doing right now, except we're 4 feet away from each other and I have a camera in my hand. That's basically what a session with me is like.
So was there a difference in the interaction then at the moment of you making these photographs, the Dancers in Motion?
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
different to when you're then photographing the individuals that have popped up in your other portrait series.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, these people, well, first of all, these people were all performers, which has a whole other connotation. Often with sort of more ordinary people, it's about making them feel comfortable. These people feel comfortable in front of a camera. They're performative by nature. So in some ways it ends up becoming a collaboration between myself and them, trying to figure out how you move, how you fill the frame, how long you're staying here, how long you're staying there. So in some ways it's sort of, we're doing choreography, then I'm hitting the shutter and they're performing, which is a very different thing than me trying to make the person feel comfortable so that I could take a portrait of them. You know, years ago, a relative of mine, I took some portraits for him for an author photo. And I was talking to his wife and I said, she said, "Oh, those pictures of TJ came out really great." And I said, "Yeah, I was really happy with those." And she said, "Yeah, we were going through them," and she had them on an iPad. She was flipping through. She said, "I said, this is the one you should use for your author photo." And he took the iPad from me and he said, he flipped it too forward and he says, "This is the one that I want on my obituary." And I thought to myself, man, if I take the picture that somebody wants to represent them when they're dead, like that's the ultimate honor, right? Like this is so close that this is me in a way that I haven't been captured before, or the way I want to be seen, or whatever's going on psychologically in the subject. But I loved that idea that you could get so inside of somebody that is the representation they want to be them after they're gone, you know? And so in some ways, in the back of my mind, I've always got this weird thing like, oh man, I hope I can take their obituary picture today, you know, the one that they're remembered by, you know?
I mean, I'm really pincering in on this then, but exactly what you're saying, but let's apply it back to these images.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you think any of your dancer friends would want these images to represent them as humans?
It's a good question. I don't know. I can ask a few of them and get back to you on that. I know that almost all the people I did these with, and I think I shot 9 people, I think 8 or 9 people for this series. All of them were very happy with the outcome. Because I think it is sort of, they feel different, you know. It's a problem that I had with dance photography in general, is that so often dance photography is by definition sort of a moment in time, right? Like you're trying to take a slice, you're trying to take one frame of a movie. You know, you have all this motion going on and it's like, well, it's now that we're going to freeze it and the person's in the air or whatever it is. This is, I mean, very traditional dance photography, what you see on posters for a company or that kind of thing on buses. And I appreciate it, but I also think you're leaving something out of what is dance, because dance has this temporal element that we've talked about. So I think that in some ways, the nice thing about this for these dancers is that, you know, it's catching them actually moving and shows them actually moving. Whether or not it represents them as people, I don't know. I mean, that's a whole psychological conversation of whether or not dancers see themselves as individuals or see themselves as, you know, puppets that they are moving around for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like their body is something other than
the dancer is separate to the dance.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, elements of painterliness. You know, I noticed even in the earlier photograph we looked at back here, this one, this little nod still to movement, something happening, something active.
Sure. Slow enough shutter speed that you actually are showing something. Yeah. I think that was actually just available light coming through the window in that shot.
But has it always been, I mean, has it always been a fascination of yours, something about movement?
No, I actually stole that from a guy named Marvin Newman, who was a sports photographer back in the 60s and 70s. And I saw a presentation he was giving once, and there was a picture of a boxer, and he was probably shooting with Kodachrome 25, you know, some incredibly slow film in the dark in a boxing ring. So just imagine the shutter speeds. He must have been like, you know, at a, you know, half a second or something. And there was this picture, and this, just as this guy threw a punch and just smeared the red glove through the frame. And I saw him giving this presentation. I just thought to myself, oh man, that would be amazing to do long exposure shots of a baseball player swinging, or, you know, a guy swinging a hammer or whatever it is. And the first one I tried was one of my dancer friends. And I thought, oh, screw the carpenters and the baseball players. I'm just going to do all dancers, because they're going to look so much better doing this anyway. So
there's a really famous photograph by Robert Wesno called Dances from 1950. Yeah. I did wonder if you knew that photograph, if you'd ever.
I do not know.
Because it's looking the wrong way in the theatre. I suppose what is the empty space of the auditorium, so it's black. The dancer doing exactly this, black and white, 1950 dancers. such incredible fluidity of movement.
Isn't it interesting though that you know, I don't know this photograph, although I'm not surprised. People have done stuff like this before. But even like a lot of the people I know who shoot fashion and stuff, and they, you know, they're taking some pictures and they think that they've come up with something amazing, and you look back and you go, this is Cecil Beaton from 1932. You know what I mean? Like, it's very rare that somebody actually comes upon something that is truly different, you know, and usually it requires some level of, you know, new technique or technology comes in that allows you, you know, when strobe photography came in, oh, you could do stuff you couldn't do before strobes. Okay, so now we're starting to do something different. But, you know, these were all taken with just a constant light and a long shutter speed, you know, so there's nothing other than the ability to do a lot of digital manipulation after the fact to really pull out what are sort of very low contrast latent images initially. It's, you know, there's not much to it. So yeah.
So
And you have to send me a link to this photo.
of these photographs, I mean, this is a particular question, I suppose, a technical question that I certainly know some of the students would want to ask, would be about, you know, the kind of nuts and bolts mechanics of making this photograph. You're using, you're actually not using anything particularly fancy then to do these.
No, it's a black sweep seamless paper. It's a Alien Bees, which is a sort of a cheap strobe, but not even the strobe, just the modeling light. So basically a light bulb into a medium softbox, like a 2 by 3 foot softbox. So like a, you know.
So are you bursting the light at different junctures?
No. It's all constant light.
Constant, all of it.
Yeah. And the only reason that they show up in certain places is because they stopped there for a beat. They stop for a half a second and then keep moving and stop and keep moving and stop. And so they'll show up in those 3 places.
Drag.
Yeah, it's like a 4 second shutter.
Yeah. But we use,
you just got to make sure you're on a tripod. Wait, what did you say? I missed something. You said
just when we're working in school, we are using pops of light at different points in the movement.
Yep.
To freeze.
You can certainly do that, but that gives a slightly different look. I mean, if you really look at you know, if you zoom in on the sort of people in them where they look like they're solid, they're still a little blurry because they themselves are moving a little bit. If you popped a strobe at that time, first of all, you'd have to use a really low power strobe in order so that it wouldn't completely overwhelm, you know, the stuff that's going on from dragging the shutter. But there's also, I think that changes. It becomes sort of this hybrid picture, you know, that you could almost do a similar thing in Photoshop by dragging the shutter, doing a full shot of that, and then bringing in stills that are you know, were shot with a strobe. This is a little different in the sense that there's no strobe. It's all just constant light. In fact, if you want, I can send you one of the raw files of one of these if you want to see what they looked like before I did anything to them. Yeah, might be interesting for you.
We'd love to look at them and see, because this is a learning tool for us. It's so valuable.
Sure.
Contextually, of course, vital, but this is where the technical stuff is actually really, really important.
But again, like you said, there's nothing technical about this. It's literally like a skylight and a dragged shutter. Okay. You know, there's not much about it.
What kind of time frame were you working over? You know, you said that you worked with probably 8 or 9 different people.
Yeah, I think I did all of these in I don't know, 6 weeks or so. When I get into something, I go all in on something. That's like my big problem, or my greatest strength, I guess, depending on how you look at it. I want to do something and I want to finish it and I want to move on to the next thing. So the minute I knew I wanted to start doing a series of these, I set up a bunch of dancers and had them come over at night for a couple weeks straight.
What happened, or rather, how did it happen that you arrived at the red swathes of fabric?
In the basically the one shot too that Iran was in. She happened to be wearing red that day. The rest of them were wearing either sort of like nude or muted colored stuff.
Yeah.
There were actually a couple that were nude just because it like worked well. But he ran, yeah, was wearing red there, and in the I think the picture in the opening shot that you zoomed in on, yeah. So that was just by chance, but it ended up working. I originally liked the idea of having them all sort of be neutral, but it's funny because two of my favorite shots from the series are with her in red.
Yeah.
So maybe I should have had people put on different colors or something like that.
I mean, I look across again the whole or the available archive on your website, your own website, for example.
Sure.
And your colors are often really very saturated. So when you pick out a color, especially the primaries, really, you're kind of drawing them out of the frame. And I wonder,
Sandy, are you saying that my colors are too saturated? Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, no, I'm not. I'm just.
Oh.
I'm wondering that there's a running thread through all of the work that where red pops up again and again, and also this cobalt blue. And I'm wondering why those colors are so special to you.
It's interesting. Well, obviously I think about color and I want things to pop to a certain extent. I don't think about color as much as you probably would think that I think about color. I mean, Mark there on the lower right, he was wearing, he had that jacket in his closet, and I said, "Oh, that's great. It's colorful. Let's use that." Or Kelsey showed up and, she was wearing this pink red dress that sort of matches her crazy red hair. And I was like, "That's great. Here, get in the tub." That's, by the way, her as well. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think that I just generally will tell people to bring clothing that either gives something, is either overly elegant in cut or style, or maybe is interesting in color. But I certainly don't oversaturate things on purpose. It's funny, when I look at that picture in the lower right-hand corner of Heather McGinley, I would bring down that blue a little bit if I had to do it over again. Yeah. But since this is like 5 years old, it's like
when I put the slides together and I'd made my selection of the photographs that I was hoping we would talk to, if I was to rapidly go through the slides across all the color, it is the red and this blue that pops out, and it really does pop out as a recurring theme. And maybe there was almost an element also of what I was selecting from your archive that stood out about the red and the blue. I certainly know that in talking to students, and I've mentioned my student who talked about your work for Articulation Prize, that actually red became kind of like a vital element in your work, in the Dancers in Motion.
Actually, isn't it interesting though that that may be true, that there is this thread that goes through, and it may be that that's what drew you or her or them to these images, and you could even write an entire argument that I am somehow bringing these all the way through. But I will tell you that I have no conscious thought about bringing those colors all the way through. It's completely unconscious. Yeah. I remember when I was talking to somebody recently who was talking about, they were, God, I forget what painting it was, some famous painting. And it turned out that the red they used as the dress in the painting, it was basically the only red paint that they had when they painted the dress. And now it's this famous thing that, they made it out of this very particular red. And, the person was just like, no, that's just the red I had. It's not that I thought about that red for 6 weeks beforehand,
But they're also very classical colors. I mean, again, we're going back to painting. If I think about going to the National Gallery and seeing the epic paintings of people like Rubens or Titian, for example.
Sure. And like I said earlier, those are people who I would list as sort of my heroes. So maybe I'm just, unconsciously doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My art teacher at school always used to say to me, and my students will laugh because I say this to them now all the time, that art can't exist in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying earlier that it's very rare to find something that has the entirety of originality in it. There's always references from somewhere.
Yeah, you just have to have the knowledge or the history to understand where those references come from. I mean, it's the same thing in music. It's the same thing in, It's like, oh, that little line, that's, you know, it's a bebop line, but it's also in some weird Bach prelude or whatever, you know, it like goes all the way back if you really follow it.
How has your musicianship affected these photographs? I mean, this is kind of coming back to a similar question I asked at the beginning about performance, but is there a particular musicality? I mean, I wanted to speak to you a little about the sound you see.
Yeah, I think that I have something of a knack for composition and balance. And I think if it was going to be anything, it would be that sort of element of music that I bring into my photography.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's like I know when to I know when to hit the shutter, you know, like which is a pacing kind of thing, which is also a musical element.
Mm.
Um, but beyond that, I tend to think of them as very different pursuits. In fact, in some ways, opposite sides of a coin, kind of going back to that sort of temporal element of music or dance or something where the clock is ticking, to photography where the whole idea is to stop the clock. Um, so it gives me power that I don't have when doing music. During this COVID lockdown, I actually opened up a Logic file and actually started writing a new tune and have sent it to a bunch of musician friends of mine to play on. And it's been really lovely because I get to exercise this part of my brain that I normally don't when it comes to photography.
You mentioned the word control there. And again,
Yeah.
that's something that I really want to try and probe, I guess.
Control is everything.
Control. I mean, the impression I have had from looking at your work, especially the corners work, and I suppose the dancers in motion as well, is that even when there's a sense that you're being or you're allowing freedom within the frame,
Yep.
but you're allowing it, you're in control of it completely. Is that
Yeah.
something that is who you are?
Yeah. I don't tend to, I mean, I'm not one of those people who is trying to control absolutely everything that goes on in my photographs. There are those people.
Mm.
But I am somewhere where, of the things that I choose to control, I want to control them almost as strongly as I can. Now, when there's people involved, you only get so much control over somebody in front of you. I am not a person who will completely pose somebody and say, you're going to sit like this, and then I'm going to take this picture because that's the way I have the light set up.
Mm.
I'll give them a chair. Even the corner, the whole idea of the corner pictures was, here you go. You have 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet tall. There's these 3 chairs over here. You could sit on the floor. You could sit on the chair, sit or stand or pose yourself however you feel comfortable.
But isn't that interesting? Because pose yourself however you feel comfortable, but I'm putting you in a corner to do it.
Yeah, I'm containing you in some sort of space. You get freedom within the space that I've created, like you said. Absolutely. But I'm also one of those people who, you know, I do almost all of my own retouching. You
Mm.
know, I paint, I like the
Make
corner
the
I made right, exactly. I paint my backdrops, right? So, you know, almost to a fault, my need for control, I think sometimes limits my output, because while I'm a very competent retoucher, I'm a good retoucher, I know excruciatingly amazing retouchers. You know, if I take one of my pictures and, you know, give it to my friend Meredith to retouch instead of me retouching it, you know, and she does ads for L'Oreal, her retouching is going to be better than mine. And my picture that has my name on it could possibly be even better than it would be if I'm controlling it all the way. And yet for some reason, I can't often give up that control. You know, I've been doing short films lately, and I write them and I shoot them and I edit them and I direct them. You know what I mean? And I color them.
Yeah.
Even though I know people who are colorists and editors and cinematographers and writers.
After all that control, though, how does it make you feel when your work then gets released out into the world? I mean, I've explained to you, you know, I first discovered your work quite a few years ago through Dancers in Motion, looking
Yeah.
with my students because of movement.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
And in many ways, you were of course, unknown to me, and then became increasingly known through study. But I was able to see the images, consume the images, create kind of like a relationship with the images. And here we are today talking about them. And
But do you feel like, do you have that with almost all artists you find?
um, often, I mean, I think it's a particular way of looking that
I,
one either.
I will say that the reason why I like having that much control, and this is a double-edged sword here, is that I both get all of the, I get all the glory and all of the I get all the downside and all of the upside simultaneously, right? If someone doesn't like it, it's no one's fault but my own. Or if someone doesn't understand it, or it goes over not well. If it does go over well, I can say that went over well because I had vision, or I tried something and I achieved it. If I go and I collaborate with 6 different people, I don't know whether people like it because the retouching is amazing, or because I had this person do my costuming, or because whatever. I have a hard time then taking any of the praise for it, because I will automatically assume that it was all the other elements that I didn't have control over that are the reason why it's good. It's like a very self-deprecating sort of mindset. But in some ways, by holding on to as much control as I can say this picture of Kelsey on the left with my weird hobbit feet in it is my photograph soup to nuts, right? You know, like, other than Kelsey and her fantastic hair, or, you know, Michael Trusnevek there jumping up in the air and his fantastic muscles, it's, you know, like everything else about those images is my doing, and therefore I can say those are mine in a way that I can't if I collaborate more.
But that's also, you know, this sense that then they get released out into the world. Are
Yep.
you actually okay with other people feeling like they
Commenting on them,
have
or?
a relationship with them?
Oh, sure, absolutely. But it's also interesting that you can't control the relationship people have with them, or the way that they see your picture. Some people come up to me and they'll say, you know, oh, I saw this picture of yours. This is the story I've come up in my mind to explain why she's in the bathtub or whatever. And it'll be,
Are all your photographs about stories to you, actually, would be something?
no, I think that, I mean, no. This one on the left definitely is. The one down the bottom of Mark is just because that was fun, and I thought it would be fun to lay him down on the floor on top of a bunch of records. But I think most of my portraits, if anything, I don't want them to be about stories. I want them, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but these are 3 kind of odd examples in many ways, because I almost always have my subject's eyes looking at the camera. I want the viewer to be looking into the eyes. I also generally use wider lenses. I tend to shoot with the equivalent of like a 28 to a 50. I don't shoot with sort of portrait lenses, quote unquote, like longer lenses with short depth of field and that kind of stuff. Because as if you were standing in front of this person, you would see them like this. You wouldn't see them the equivalent of 25 feet away zoomed in, which is what long lenses do. It can be flattering, but I don't think it has the same immediacy to your brain to say, oh, I might actually be 5 feet away from this ballerina hailing a cab in the bad part of town.
When you're speaking, all of this is starting to occur to me, though, that I mean, I haven't picked any photograph of yours in which the subject makes eye contact.
I know, isn't that weird?
Let's have a look. I mean, I think the one in the bathtub is the only one.
Yeah, which is very interesting, because almost always they're looking. Yeah.
But everything else that I select, in fact, everything else I talk about in your work, is perhaps the opposite of that.
Yeah, which is so see, this is exactly it. I'm trying to control this one thing, and you, Sandy Robertson over in the UK, are completely missing what I'm trying to do. Or not trying to, no, not missing, but you know what I'm saying? Like that you're looking, you're gravitating towards the ones that I tend to think are my least like me, as far as what I'm trying to like consciously accomplish. You know, a lot of these, especially like the nude of Sasha, or the motion or the distortion, or a lot of those are in many ways sort of experiments for me. You know what I mean?
Maybe it's that I'm a teacher, that I am picking out the experimental work, because that's how I see the process for us maybe emulating you.
Totally, it could be. Yeah. It's,
Um, but also, I think there's an element of having where there's an incredible intensity in your work,
yeah, I mean, I try to do that.
but where there is that
That one's me. Wait, say again?
where there is an intensity in your work,
Yeah.
sometimes the power of the gaze of the sitter as well is just actually, frankly, too much
Too
sometimes.
much for you, too intense.
Um, that there needs to be a bit of space so that I can. This is selfishly for me now,
Sure.
that I can really be still and quiet in looking.
Yeah. I
Without,
want, I see, I would tend to try to make a picture like, you know, on here, the one in McGinley in the right hand corner, where it would feel like you were sitting down on the ground across from her. That's what I want it to feel like. And maybe it does that, maybe it doesn't, but that's sort of my goal, right? And to that point, I shot all of these corner pictures with a 35 millimeter lens. So like not a normal lens, you know, medium wide angle lens. So I was 5 feet away from them or less, you know. Um, so there is something to that. And I mean, that's what I shoot a lot of my commercial work or editorial work is the same way. And people find it strange because you know, I'm 5 feet away and you see all the space around them because I'm shooting wide.
what is the, again, prior to speaking on record,
Yeah.
I wrote I wrote you some sample questions, and one of
The
the things,
Drabble stuff.
yeah, the kind of being somehow sullied.
It's funny because I think it may be a British or American English thing. Because a drabble apparently is also a literary term
Mm.
for a story of exactly 100 words,
Okay.
which is where I was coming at them. The idea was, you know, I'm going to show you this photograph, and there's obviously something weird or crazy going on here,
Mm.
but I'm not going to give you enough information to fill out the entire story. I'm going to sort of leave it up to you. That was the whole idea of this series.
Isn't it amazing through different lenses with which we view? Because I took very much this notion on board in my interpretation of the word, the type,
Well, they are a lot of those images are particularly gritty.
and they're dark. The
Yeah,
theme dark.
they're much more dark than, not necessarily luminously dark, as in like low level, like, you know, physically dark, but but sort of they're dark in a HBO kind of way, you know.
That's exactly it. Yeah, darker.
Yeah. Yeah, which is somewhat ironic because I don't like scary stuff. I don't like horror. My wife does a zombie podcast, and I can't watch any of the stuff that she has to watch for her podcast. So it's odd that I am doing this, and I actually just wrote a script about two women, one of whom is a serial killer. So it's like, you know, there's stuff that I will write or come up with in my head that I don't want to see other people make. Like, it doesn't interest me at all, or it scares me or keeps me up at night. So yeah, I mean, this woman was a ballerina, and I found a really dirty street in Williamsburg, and we decided to, you know, shoot her outside on the street hailing a cab. And there were a bunch in that series that are, you know, who knows what the heck is going on in them. You know what I mean? There's some really creepy ones. There's the guy on the bike. There's the woman out on the fire escape. It's actually the fire escape I'm looking at right here. So yeah, those were definitely sort of early images of mine that were more conceptual in nature. You know, it's like I was trying to tell a story. They weren't straight portraits. The people in them were acting, where most of my portraits are portraits for portrait's sake, meaning that they are actually being them in the images. This is an example of some of my early work where Amber's playing a role in this particular case. Yeah. You like the ones with dancers. See, even the Drabbles, you choose one with a dancer.
Yeah, only because obviously it also ties in with what I'm
Your blue theory.
my blue theory and my dancer's theory. But
Yeah.
it does lead me to my last question, which is, who is your next muse?
My next muse, God, who knows? You know, it's funny. I keep going back to certain people. because there are certain people who just are easy to work with and who I want to work with as subjects. Well, there's two ways to answer this question. There's the subjects who will be my next muse, like who's the person in front of my lens. But then there's also, in the same way that I was saying about that Marvin Newman, it's like I see somebody else's work and that makes me shoot off in a different direction of, oh, I'm going to start shooting these long exposure pictures of these dancers. I don't know. And, I've come to this realization, because I've done 4 years of daily portrait series. I've shot thousands of people doing these daily portrait series too. And both of those series, the first one I had planned to do one a day for a year. And then 2017 came around. It was the day before 2017 started. So it was the New Year's Eve on 2017. And I was lying in bed with my wife. We were about to go to sleep. And I said, I don't know that I can sit around and watch what happens with Donald Trump being the president. I need something to keep my mind busy when I'm not busy with work. So I'm going to start another daily series. And she said, portraits? And I said, yeah. She goes, all right. And I ended up doing 3 years of that. So, 3 years straight, which I was not planning on doing 3 years straight. And if you told me at the beginning, you're going to take pictures of 1,095 people over the course of the next 3 years, everywhere you go, if you're in London doing a shoot for a magazine, you got to find people in London and shoot them. If you're out west, in California, you're going to find somebody in California and shoot them. That is so daunting. It's like the idea of like running 3 marathons, right? But if you just start running and just don't stop, that's the way it works for me. Anytime that I try to plan out and know what it is that I'm going to do, if I say to myself, you know what, I'm going to do XYZ for the next 2 years, or I'm going to do this project and I'm going to find a way to get press for it so it gets me more work in this direction or whatever it is, it's never, ever, ever successful. The only projects that I ever do that are successful are the ones that I sort of mentally fall into and they sort of grab onto me and then I can't let them go. So pre-planning never works. It's always the ones that sort of fall into my lap and I just follow into the woods,
Isn't that
so
fascinating for somebody who loves to control?
well, that's the funny thing. Yeah. Because it's curiosity ultimately, right? It's like, I want the control once I know what it is that I'm doing, but I find that when I try to control that initial step of figuring out what I'm going to do next, it never works, or at least it never has in 20 years of doing all of this stuff. But it allows me to sort of step back and say, you know what, it's okay. Just let it come to me eventually, Yeah, he ran in the red.
Wow, Bill Wadman, I hope you know how inspirational you've been to us. We're very
I'm glad I could be of help. I feel like I'm not sure that I gave good answers. Did I give good answers? That's what I want to.
You give amazing answers. You give the best answers because they're the only answers you could give.
See, there's the teacher in you.
Bill Wadman, thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Sandy.
Bye.